Klinger and Company. On the road with the Northwest Premier Interviewer. Today, Dick is at the Stan Sayers pits with the Seafair Unlimited Hydroplane drivers. And now, Klinger and Company.
Well, I guess we could easily call this Saturday afternoon a quiet Saturday at Stan Sayers pits before the big regatta race tomorrow. My guests this afternoon on the program are Tom Deeth and Chip Hanauer, Ron Armstrong, John Walters, and Steve Reynolds. Nice of you all to take some time out of the hot, sunny afternoon to come here. What kind of a day is this? Very quiet, no boats running around here. So what's this kind of a day like for you?
Well, it should be race day. The water is absolutely perfect. There's no wind. We would like to have a day like this tomorrow.
I'd like to know from you about what kind of a day it was last Sunday in Pasco, whether it was a thumbs up or thumbs down for going or not going.
Well, I gave the thumbs down. I thought that the water conditions were all right, but the wind was gusting. It was crossing gusts. I've been racing for 24 years, and I encountered things that happened to me on the race course that I haven't encountered in 24 years of racing. And it felt like you were running a Volkswagen and a Greyhound bus just went by you.
Well, how about anybody else? What about thumbs up, thumbs down at Pasco? You were outvoted. Everybody else went out and ran that final heat, huh?
Right, that's right. I was basically thumbs downing for a postponement so that we could run at a later time.
Okay. And you were looking for a wire, I think, weren't you?
I think John Walters and I would have been happy just to get that far to give thumbs down. I got about 20 feet away from the dock, and John was a little more successful. He was about maybe 100 yards. Yeah,
60.
About 60 feet. Yeah.
60 feet away. Okay. Was there a time, another time maybe in '76 when you gave a thumbs up or thumbs down at Tri-Cities that was a major kind of turning point in your racing career?
Not as far as the racing conditions are concerned. We had a problem in Tri-Cities in 1976 with the timing of the actual one of the heats, and I was suspended for the day and had to move the racing team to Seattle to continue racing the rest of the year.
And was it difficult for you to get a regular racing job after that for a while?
Well, I don't know if it was difficult. It took 6 years to get back in Unlimiteds, but in defense of the sport, in '77 they had some lean years where there really weren't that many boats around that needed drivers. Actually, to kind of fit me in a spot, somebody would have had to get fired or moved on to make a place for me. Bill Muncie owned and drove his own boat, and the Budweiser team, they had their driver and were very content with that. So. And finally, when new rides did become available, that was about 3 or 4 years down the road, and I think they just pretty much forgot about me.
So what happened this year? How did you get hired on this year?
Well, after Chip went over to the Atlas Van Lines, it left a vacancy in the Squire Shop camp, and I think probably Chip had a lot to do with it. My name must have been mentioned. I drove for Don Ryan out of Bellingham, Washington, and when Chip wasn't able to run that boat, he recommended me to drive the Don Ryan boat, which I won 2 national championships with. So I think that's basically how it got tossed back in the hat again. Jerry Zubich, the crew chief, contacted me, and I talked with Bob Style on several occasions, and finally, early this year, we put the package together.
There's an article that will appear in tomorrow morning's Seattle Post-Intelligencer by a writer whose name is Steve Rudman, who says that the 4 fastest hydroplanes in the past 2 years have gone over backwards, and 2 of the best drivers have been killed. He says it's time for Seafair to withdraw its support or sanction of this sport in Seattle, because he says that the sport is doing nothing to protect itself, especially after last weekend at Pasco. It's an irrational use of technology, corporate avarice, and indifference. We want to talk about that for a while? Okay, John, you're up.
I'd like to talk about that, you bet.
Okay.
I think that, you know, the sport of unlimited hydroplane racing is one of the most technically advanced sports in all of motor racing. We've got many, many obstacles that we have to overcome. We've got a lot of different elements that we have to deal with. I think that everybody involved in the sport is, you know, professionals at the highest level. Right now, I think that in all honesty, the boats are probably going about 10 miles an hour faster than they were really designed to be going. And in light of that, the guys ended up having to, you know, run the equipment right on the ragged edge. But the drivers of these boats are professionals. They know full well getting into the sport that there are some risks involved, as there are risks involved in any form of racing. Anytime you go fast, there's going to be some risk. I think that, you know, in the long run, the best solution is going to be better boat design. I think that, you know, people are working on that right now. I know my team manager, Jim Lucero, is frantically working on ways of making the boats safer and safer. We've incorporated things in the Atlas van lines to help, you know, make Chip's boat safer. We're working on things on our boat, and we're currently in the process right now of trying to come up with some devices that will indeed make all the boats safer and will be available to any team that wants that. In the meantime, I really think that maybe we ought to be looking at running some shorter race courses.
Okay.
I think, you know, Mr. Rudman's whole philosophy, what John says is absolutely true. It will get safer and safer, as it has in the past. The sport's safer now than it was 10 years ago, than it was 5 years ago. We've had some unfortunate, you know, incidents. But, you know, the whole mentality, if we go along with Mr. Rudman, I think we better put a cyclone fence around Mount Rainier, because that's an irrational use of that mountain trying to climb it. You know, people have been getting killed there for some time. And we better make sure people don't dive in Puget Sound anymore, and that they don't fly private planes over the Cascades. We should just put a limit on the human spirit if we're going to go along with his way of thinking.
But what, Steve, did you have your hand up for this too?
Well, I don't know that I could add anything more than Chip or John have said. I agree with them totally. It sounds to me like, not to make an attack on Mr. Rudman, but he really is very uninformed about what he's writing about. And to me, to take journalistic license just to create some type of controversy so people will read your article is poor journalism, in my opinion. I don't think that the man took the time to investigate our sport or look into it or contact any of us or our officials to find out any of the safety, the things we're doing in the way of design and what we do to police our own safety procedures. I think we do an excellent job. I have no reason to stand here or anybody else and make excuses or apologies for anything that we've done. I think the strides that we're taking to make this sport safer and a better sporting event and a good entertainment, I think we're doing a very good job.
Well, until some of these others are put into effect, what about a speed limit of some kind?
I think it's impossible. How could you possibly enforce a speed limit? And I think reason is the only thing that can really carry the sport on. You know, I personally believe that I think that the boats have, in some ways, exceeded the technology available to keep them completely safe. I don't know, how do you define completely safe, but I think that watching some of them run, you know, I have fears, you know, quite frankly. But then I've stood back and I've not been able to have the fastest boat in a while, and maybe those boats are very safe. But sometimes watching them, certainly watching Bill, I felt very insecure at times watching him drive. I think that the power and the potential is awesome, and if it is not used in a very careful manner, the sport does have some problems in that area, and safety is one thing that needs to be improved on.
What about watching Chip go out yesterday though and set a new world's record at 140 miles? Is that going too fast?
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I really think
Well,
it's
actually,
exciting.
the way he did it was very easy. I watched the record, and Chip drove the boat right at the way it was designed to be driven. The boat ran around the race course flawlessly. He made two beautiful corners that lap. It stayed right on, glued on the water down the straightaway. It was a perfect example of how a hydroplane should run. But to get back to what we were talking about a speed limit, I personally believe, I'm a boat builder and I also design and build racing propellers. There are things that we can do, in my opinion, to keep these boats glued down on the water. Rules that we could come up with that everybody would have to comply with that wouldn't necessarily restrict us as far as horsepower or hull design, but would make the boat safer. They would slow them down a little
What
bit.
kinds of things?
Well, basically, what causes bow lift in a boat from a propeller standpoint of view is a lot of rake. And I think a limit could be put on the amount of rake a propeller has. Approximately around 12-degree rake would be about as maximum as I think anybody would want to ever run on a boat that's going to run 180 miles an hour. I also believe that all the boats should have a cavitation plate on them that would extend approximately 4 to 6 inches beyond the tip of the propeller.
I don't know what a cavitation.
Well, a cavitation plate is actually a plate that extends beyond the transom over the top of the propeller. So if the boat were to get in a bow-up attitude, this plate would actually absorb some of the impact from the rooster tail, create more lift, and keep the back of the boat up, rather than having a boat without a cavitation plate, and the last thing that's actually in the water is the propeller, and it's the last driving force, and it actually the propulsion from the prop carries the back of the boat in front of the boat.
John.
I think you know, that because the boats are termed unlimited hydroplanes and they are basically unlimited, they're really, because of the abundance of hull designs and the abundance of power plants and all that are available today, there isn't any really one restriction that you can put on any of the boats that is fair and equal opportunity for everybody. I've been, you know, a very big fan of, you know, for a couple of years, ever since we had our accident, of running smaller race courses, and I really feel that that's the way to go, something like a 2-mile maximum race course. We end up still having to run the boats to the maximum of their ability. We still see on a 2-mile race course 170 miles an hour in the straightaways, but you just achieve that 170 miles an hour, and then you have to set up to go into the turn. The real problem with the boats right now is that the straightaways are so long that you get halfway down the straightaways, the boats get through the turn so well, they accelerate so well, that at half track you're seeing 165, 170 miles an hour. The boats are getting extremely aired out at that point, and then you have to go from that halfway point all the way into the turn, and the boat's just kind of hanging there on the ragged edge waiting for something to go wrong. I really think, you know, that we can put on excellent racing on smaller race courses. We run 1 2/3 miles in Miami. We run 2-mile race courses several places in the country, and in my opinion, they're the best races that we have all year long.
Should this one be shorter here then?
I would be in favor of changing it to a 2-mile race course, you know, every place in the country.
We have a break here, and we'll continue this conversation Saturday afternoon at Stan Sayers Pits. We'll be right back.